The Watchers is a traditional fantasy horror movie set in a secluded forest in Ireland, where a young girl who seems to be lost in life is trapped into an observation chamber with strangers who must figure out how to escape and survive. The film is directed by M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, Ishana Shyamalan. M. Night Shyamalan is also the producer on the film. While I do believe the film has some good moments, specifically the first half of the film, the second half and ending really left the viewer down, and you're left feeling like this is an incomplete movie. We are introduced to our main character, Mina. Mina is shown to be a little bit of a rule breaker who is avoiding her family and avoiding life as well. She puts on a costume, becomes someone else, and goes on a one-night stand. She doesn't like who she is and would prefer to pretend to be someone else. On her trip, Mina's car breaks down in the forest. Mina is then chased into the observation chamber by the beast. The middle chunk of the film is a cat-and-mouse game of the Watchers who demand to be able to watch Mina and the others at night, but they are unable to get out of the forest in a single day. During this period of the film is classic Shyamalan flair of suspense and jumps, done well enough, but nothing extraordinary. And by happenstance, Mina and the others discover a chamber underneath the observation chamber. We learn what the Watchers are and that this observation chamber was made by a professor to study them. This is where the film goes off the rails, unfortunately. The Watchers are the fairies of Celtic folklore and have the ability to mimic, so that's why they watch people so they can mimic them. At this point, the film stops being a horror movie and starts just being a massive lore dump about the fairies, which there is real no point for us to have so much lore about the fairies when, at that point, you've left the forest and don't get to see the fairies anymore. The one on-screen death we see looks really dumb and makes no sense, and the final shot of the fairies is a bunch of bad CGI naked Ken dolls. The rest of the story is just more lore dump on fairies, and the climax makes no real sense as far as character rationalization is concerned, and is very unsatisfactory. Mina reconnects with her sister, who's just Dakota Fanning with scar makeup, and then we are given a superhero epilogue shot of the fairy as a little girl, like she's about to go and save the world. Walking out of the theater, your main thought is, this movie was bad. The ending makes you feel like this is the beginning of the fairy cinematic universe, and the fairy is going to join the Avengers in the next movie. This movie starts as a horror movie and ends as a really bad fantasy movie. And because of all the lore dumps at the end of the movie, they forgot to have any sort of real character development or arc or interesting plot to escape the Watchers. The solution is just handed to them. The bigger question I would like to say, rather than really diving super deep into this film, is why was this film made? This is a Nepo baby film. Nepotism made this movie. I think this film is a great metaphor for what is wrong in the film industry and in many ways our society as a whole. If a person is successful, hands off their position and their status to their offspring, even if the first time this is done, it works, eventually it leads to someone getting a role they don't deserve and can't fill. Only because of Ishana's dad is she able to make a movie like this, which has money and effort that could have been better spent on someone with more experience and talent, and now that person doesn't have the chance to do that. There can only be so many major motion pictures in a year, so someone else lost their slot. Another huge issue with this movie, and Shyamalan movies in general, is in all Shyamalan movies, there's always a cat in a bag. When the cat is in the bag, Shyamalan movies are intriguing nail-biters that you want to see more of, but once the cat is let out of the bag, the movies end up being pretty bad and stupid. And in this movie, they let the cat out of the bag way too early. I feel like half of this movie is M. Night Shyamalan horror movie about the Watchers, and the second half is an Ishana Shyamalan movie that's a fantasy movie about the fairies. Sadly, neither are really great experiences. There is some deeper subtext to this film. The use of mirrors, the use of mimicry, the not wanting to be who you really are, sort of hiding one's true self. There are some basic subtext themes that are explored in the earlier part of the movie, but unfortunately, none of those sort of seeds that are planted at the beginning of the movie are really capitalized on. There's really no huge character development. There's no real large plot development, honestly. It's just a giant lore dump about these fairies, and to be perfectly honest, there is no point for this lore about these fairies. If anyone, they could have made references to the Celtic folklore, and then someone could have looked up the Celtic folklore. Instead, the movie just sort of tells you the Celtic folklore and then has a very unsatisfactory plot. It's sort of the classic, they're telling, not showing. In reality, in a good film, you show, don't tell. Only telling us what's going on and not really showing us particularly. This movie feels like an incomplete movie. And honestly kind of feels like a student film, which it kind of is. Shauna is getting to use her dad's influence as a way to make a major motion picture student film. And I would say that us as the consumer is left in a poor situation for it. Thanks for listening to my analysis or review or just dissatisfaction with The Watchers. If you like this video, it would be great if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing to the channel. And if you would consider supporting me on Patreon, it goes a long way for me to make more of these videos. Thank you.